Welcome, friends. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Dick and Sharon. Obviously, I'm Dick, and this is Sharon, editor and publisher of LA Progressive. Today, we thought we'd talk about two recent articles we published. One of them is by Stephen Hill of Democracy SOS, talking about the tape that's caused so much angst here in Los Angeles, and the real nub of it, which is about the underrepresentation of the Latino populace. And the other one is about?
The other one was written by Jasmine Canick, and it is entitled Latino Underrepresentation in Los Angeles. Who's right, who's wrong? Oh, that's wrong. Let's say that again. Okay, the other one was written by Jasmine Canick, and it's entitled Why Canceled for Being Anti-Semitic, but Not for Anti-Blackness. And in this piece, Jasmine talks about the terrible behavior, recent behavior of Kanye West, or Ye West, as his new name is. He's calling himself Ye. And apparently he uttered some anti-Semitic remarks, and almost immediately, certainly within 24 to 48 hours, he was canceled by some of the major sponsors or brands. The latest, I think, was Adidas joined the talent agency CAA that cut ties with him, and so the cutting of ties with Kanye was immediate. And what Jasmine is asking, well, why is it that when someone is anti-Semitic, which they should not be, there are consequences that are almost immediate, but when we see anti-Blackness, sometimes there's no consequence, or the consequences take a very long time.
So the big issue here in Los Angeles with the tape that Jasmine also talks about is that anti-Blackness, as it always does, has raised its ugly head. I think Jasmine is absolutely right to cite that again, that horrible issue that never goes away. I do think there's a difference in what happened with Ye or Kanye and what is not happening necessarily with the two male Latino council members who are refusing to resign. And it is this: Kanye was cut loose by private corporations or corporations that could have a Zoom call like this and say, that's it, we're done with him. As Donald Trump would say, you're fired. Nobody can make those city councilmen retire. The president of the United States, the governor of California, the mayor of Los Angeles, all the other council people on the city council, and lots of Angelenos have begged those two men to step down, but you can't make them. You can recall them, a drawn out procedure, and you can vote them out of office, as we did with one of them.
So Jasmine makes a really good point.
Yeah.
And so do you. So the protocols, the procedures that are associated with removing a LA City Council member is very different than Adidas having a contract or CAA having a contract with Kanye West. So I could see where the immediacy is really facilitated because of capitalism. But there's another point that Jasmine makes, and we didn't bring that up, and she talks about the use of the N-word. She talks about how Black people and those who use the N-word, regardless of whether they take off the R and just end it with an A instead of an ER, that they themselves support or help to facilitate the normalization of disregarding and mistreating Black people.
Yeah, as a mighty white person who's obviously not Black, I've always kind of been troubled by the use of the N-word, even among Black people, even within themselves. There's always, I mean, it has such a horribly negative root to try to flip it on its head and make it kind of a cool thing to say to each other. I don't think it always works, and obviously it doesn't work in this case, as Jasmine cited. It's used in one rap song after another that a lot of people hear and some people latch onto with its negative connotations.
Yeah, so there's, I think, maybe a generational divide with Black people. I came up, I am of the age when that term was used when I was in junior high school. I think that's kind of when it started to be used as a term of endearment. I hated it then, I hate it now. But I don't, obviously, I don't use that term. I don't invest a lot of time in complaining about people who do use it. I understand the point that Jasmine is making. I agree with her. At the same time, anti-Blackness is practiced by more than just Black people. And anti-Blackness was practiced when Black people were not using the N-word as a term of endearment. But I understand the point that she's making.
So another thrust of her argument, maybe the main thrust, is when Kanye issues his anti-Semitic remarks, the Jewish community in lockstep condemns it and exerts their power, and to the extent they had power over these corporations, they put him out of work. And she says that Black Los Angeles, or Los Angeles, has not shown the same solidarity about moving those council members out of office.
Right, so she's speaking specifically about Kevin De Leon and Gil Cedillo, the two council members that were engaged in that discussion that was leaked
Right.
with the former president, Nuri Martinez. So Kevin has refused to step down, has refused to resign. And Gil Cedillo, it's less important because he's being unseated. He wasn't successful in his primary run to run again, to be in that seat. Eunices Hernandez will be the representative, the council member sitting in the seat that Gil Cedillo now occupies. So that's less of a problem. She'll be sworn in soon. What is it, in December? In maybe 8 weeks or something.
Yeah.
In a few weeks, Eunices will be taking that seat. And by the way, Eunices is a person of Indigenous and Latina. And she's been a very committed member of the activist community, known in the community by Dick and I and by many, many, many others. So we're looking forward to that. And by the way, that's actually our council district where we live.
Yeah, so Jasmine's actually more deeply engaged with Black Lives Matter and more out in the street than we are. But my observation is Los Angeles has come together condemning the whole four of them, pressing as hard as you can to get them to leave office. And I hope this just doesn't get confined to the conversation among four people, but does address the thoroughgoing anti-Blackness bigotry that goes on in society. I mean, I would say that Black people were shocked at what the tape had to say, were upset, were hurt, but I doubt that they were truly surprised that those kind of sentiments are spoken in dark corners.
No, and I think that's why what Jasmine talks about, the lack of a response from the broader Black community, I think that speaks to the fact that they are accustomed to it. It's been normalized, and we know that this goes on. And we are actually surprised when the broader community, beyond the Black community, stands up. Like with George Floyd, most Black people were very surprised at the response, not just in Minnesota or in the United States, but the global response to the horrible thing that happened, the murder that happened, the lynching of George Floyd. But let's face it, it's not the first time a Black man has been lynched. And so we have become accustomed to people not having any empathy for us. But I want to get back to what Stephen Hill talked about in his article on the LA Progressive, Latino underrepresentation in Los Angeles, and why it is that Gil Cedillo, Kevin De Leon, and Nuri Martinez, and Ron Herrera were having the discussion in the first place. So they were having a discussion about redistricting in Los Angeles. You know, after the census, the lines are redrawn, and they were talking about how unfair it is that Latinos or Latine or Latinx are not getting their due representations, especially when you consider that they represent 48% of the population of Los Angeles. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So absolutely. What Stephen is saying, who's an expert on democracy and election systems, and an author and a really profound thinker on this, he's saying if you strip away the anti-Semitism, the anti-Blackness, the anti-darker Latinoism, the all the antis out of that conversation, they were actually talking about a real issue, which is the fact that on the LA City Council, the Latino population, which is nearly half of the Los Angeles population, has only 3 seats out of the 15. They're grossly underrepresented. Black Los Angeles is somewhat overrepresented. Asian communities are underrepresented, and that there is a legitimate issue of how you make this fair for all communities.
So the first thing that I thought of when I read this article is there are 2 issues that we could talk about. Obviously, there's much more than 2, but there are 2 issues we could talk about. One is, does your representative have to be the same race that you are in order to adequately and in a genuine way speak on your behalf? And 2, why is it that LA has 48% of Latino population? When I came to Los Angeles in 1975, that wasn't the case. And so we rarely ever talk about our unfair trade practices that led to this influx, one-way influx of immigrants that came from south of the border. We never talk about immigrants that come from anywhere else, but our tendency, and I think it's a very racist tendency, is to look at the south of the border, where the United States, has exploited people for the past 40 years for their labor, just like Black people were exploited for their labor. And now Black and brown people are forced to both battle for crumbs, when we really need to take a broader look at immigration, trade agreements, and address those issues at the root cause.
Yeah, back to your first point. I mean, we were discussing that in our district where we live, we're represented by 2 Latinas in the state legislature, Maria Elena Durazo and Wendy Carrillo. Our congressional representative, Jimmy Gomez, is Latino. Gil Cedillo, our outgoing councilman, is Latino. Eunices Hernandez, our incoming council person, is Indian origin. One of our 2 senators, Alex Padilla, is Latina, and we don't live in a Latino neighborhood. We don't live in a Black neighborhood. We live mostly in a white neighborhood, and I don't feel not represented because all my representatives are Latino. I mean, and my point there is the conversation is boiling down to too much about one aspect of humanity, the race. It's too bad that we have to feel that we have to divide up into communities and fight each other for power, when there's lots of other dynamics, economic dynamics, that we could be talking about.
Right. So the racial divide, and we often talk about race being a social construct. It's basically a social construct that was constructed for economic reasons. That continues to plague the United States. We need to have more conversations about that. But today, this week, in the past 2 weeks, all we've been talking about is the LA City Council, and most recently Kanye West and his anti-Semitic statements. One good thing to read Stephen Hill's article is it's good that some writers like Stephen are moving on to solutions. There is a real problem with underrepresentation, misrepresentation on the LA City Council, and he outlines some ways that other cities do a better job of it. Chicago has 35 council people. New York City has 50. And Chicago had 50 and New York City has 51.
Okay, well, there's various ways that you could mix and match it so that a few people's race wouldn't have such an influence. I mean, there would be more voices represented in the public square, in the chamber of council. That's a problem when you only have 15. Well, that's 15 voices have to represent all these millions of people in Los Angeles. It would be better if it was 3 times that many.
Right, right. And so Dick just named all of our representatives, our state senator, our assembly, California assembly representative, our 2 United States senators, our congressional representative, our Los Angeles city council member, and all of those people we have had connections with. Mostly, I believe, because we are the publisher and the editor of the LA Progressive. And when we contact them, they respond. The average person who doesn't get 300,000 readers a month is probably not getting the same kind of response, which is why it's so important to have more representation where you don't have a single person who's responsible or to a million people. It's impossible to be able to access that kind of representative when they have a million people that they're representing. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to close this, unless you want to have any closing remarks.
No, I was going to thank people, we will direct you to these 2 articles with the write-up that we'll post with the video.
That's right. All right. Thanks again for tuning in with Dick and Sharon, chatting coffee, having coffee. Hey, where's my coffee, Dick?
Well, I have my coffee.
Yeah, mine is
Thank you.
I'm always looking for my coffee.
And her phone.
So long.
And her keys. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.